Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are here to unveil our CCFWE's, the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment STEAR app, the support tool for economic abuse and recovery. We're going to go right ahead and get started as we have a pretty packed agenda. My name is Neha Shahzad. I'm the Senior Director for the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment. I'd like to welcome everyone here and our amazing panelists. So thank you everyone for joining. We recognize that the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples have inhabited and cared for this land and continue to do so today. We are very grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. Before we begin, I'm just going to go over some key housekeeping details to make sure we have a smooth and enjoyable experience. So if possible, I know we're in webinar mode, but just to make sure, please ensure your microphone is muted to reduce any background noise. You may use the Q&A feature within the Zoom webinar to ask any questions. The chat feature is also available for general comments and discussions. And you can keep an eye on the chat because we'll be sharing some links to our products and resources as we go along. This session is recorded and will be shared 1 week after this webinar is complete. If you're experiencing any technical issues, you may try and log out and log back into your webinar to see if that resolves the issue. Otherwise, we do have Nerida on hand in the background to help with any tech support issues. We'll be sharing some important resources and links in the chat, just like as I said. If you do have any technical assistance, you can message Nerida in the chat as well. We will have a Q&A discussion after our live demo of the app from Julia Russo, and we have a Q&A discussion with our panelists as well after the presentation. The majority of our conversation will be held in English. However, there will be closed captions in French, and if there are any questions in French, we are happy to answer them in French as well, as we have bilingual persons on the line. You can follow us at CCFWE on X, LinkedIn, or Instagram. And as you're going through the webinar, if there are things that you find are really great and you'd like to retweet, please tweet us at hashtag STEAR app or hashtag New Year, New App, Same Mission. And I would like to just put out a content warning because we do address gender-based violence. Please be advised that our panel discussion is going to cover topics related to trauma. So this discussion may include personal stories, experiences, or discussions that can be distressing or triggering for some individuals. We want to just make sure that everyone feels safe and informed while participating in the conversations. So if you need some time, we encourage you to please log off if anything is too distressing, and you can have a look at our website, ccfwe.org, that has some resources that can help you. And I will just put that link in the chat right now as well. Amazing. Okay. All right. Fantastic. So Nani is just going to translate what I have just said in French. If Nani, would you be able to do that very quickly?
Yeah, so for pour la déclaration de reconnaissance du territoire, nous reconnaissons que le Centre canadien pour l'autonomisation des femmes est situé sur le territoire non cédé de la nation algonquine Anishinaabe. Pendant des milliers d'années, les peuples autochtones ont habité et pris soin de cette terre. Aujourd'hui, ils continuent à faire ce travail important. Nous sommes reconnaissants d'avoir la possibilité de travailler sur cette terre et nous témoignons notre respect à ses premiers habitants. Pour les règles de ménage et des médias sociaux, vous pouvez utiliser le chat pour poser vos questions ou écrire vos commentaires. Cette session sera enregistrée et mise sur nos médias sociaux et notre site web une semaine après que nous avons terminé cette session. Si vous avez des problèmes techniques, envoyez un message à Nerida à l'adresse nerida.note@ccfwe.org. Le hashtag pour l'événement d'aujourd'hui est hashtag Empowering Survivors, hashtag STEAR App, hashtag End Economic Abuse ou hashtag New Year, New App. Pour continuer à participer et à engager dans nos travaux puis dans nos efforts, vous pouvez nous suivre à CCFWE sur X, Facebook, Instagram et LinkedIn. Comme Niha a mentionné, il y a des matières sensibles que nous allons discuter pendant cette session. Donc, si vous avez besoin de sortir, prendre 2 minutes et assurer que votre santé mentale et vos expériences sont bien maintenues, vous pouvez faire cela. Nous l'encourageons, puis nous sommes reconnaissants des expériences de tout le monde qui participe dans cette session. Nous voulons aussi remercier Wage pour leur contribution généreuse pour la création et le développement de cette application, et aussi Crime Prevention Ottawa, qui est maintenant amalgamé avec City of Ottawa pour leur contribution pour la traduction de cette plateforme. Merci.
Thank you, Nani. I'd like to acknowledge the many women who have survived intimate partner violence and recognize the courage, strength, and acts of resistance and resilience. The Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment would also like to acknowledge the services and organizations that have worked with these victims and survivors on their journey to safety and recovery, and whose work it is to prevent violence before it occurs. We're also incredibly grateful for the support of our funders, Women and Gender Equality Canada, and Crime Prevention Ottawa, which is now part of the City of Ottawa, for making the funding available to undertake this important work and developing this app and translating it into our multiple languages. We'd also like to thank our National Task Force for Women's Economic Justice members and our partners, volunteers, summer students, and advocates who have helped us achieve so much in such a short time. I'd like now to introduce our esteemed keynote speaker, Joanna Baker. Joanna Baker has been the Senior Director General responsible for the Programs and Regional Operations Branch at Women and Gender Equality Canada since August 2020. Under her leadership, her teams address systemic barriers for gender equality and support the capacity and sustainability of women's and equality-seeking organizations through client-centered and results-focused delivery of departmental grants and contribution programs. Prior to joining Wage, Joanna was the Director General of Business Development and Partnerships at the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, where she focused on building partnerships with key stakeholders in the innovation landscape and enhancing the awareness of intellectual property for small and medium-sized enterprises. So thank you so much, Joanna, for being here. I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Nia. It is truly a pleasure to be here today. And it's interesting, people always start their speeches off with that. And what I want to be clear about is what I mean about that today. What I mean by it's a pleasure to be here today is that it truly brings me great joy to be looped into this moment and to have a chance to share it with all of you. A moment where the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment, along with all of you, are marking a major milestone, an important step, an innovation, a solution to a disturbingly prevalent societal issue. A moment where a new app has been created to provide resource, guidance, and the power of knowledge to economic abuse survivors, and ultimately ensure women's financial independence. For me, being in a crowd of people who have either contributed to the success, created it, or supported it is truly an honor. When I personally think about the painstaking, thoughtful, perhaps creative and passion-driven work it must have taken to develop a financial safety planning app, I'm also very grateful. Because of your dedication, there will be better data in place that will help monitor systemic barriers and research best practices for policies to prevent and respond to financial abuse. Moreover, the broader project, the first Canadian Economic Justice Project to support victims of financial abuse, is addressing systemic change through economic justice for survivors of economic abuse by conducting research and data collection, establishing a national working group, creating a national action plan, generating those oh so important best practices for financial institutions. And as my kids like to say, the good news is there is now an app for that. It's important to know that this secure and trauma-informed app will offer centralized information on safety and financial matters and legal resources for economic abuse survivors. And in my mind, I think that is truly remarkable. On any given day back at the ranch at Wage, so much remarkable comes across my desk. When I read proposals, I meet with amazing advocates. When I analyze project reports, when I receive your feedback and guidance from community, it is all so remarkable. As you may know, Wage works to advance gender equality through an intersectional gendered lens. We do this by working in partnership with key stakeholders, like the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment, civil society organizations, labor groups, my friends on the screen today, the private sector, the panelists we see here, other orders of government, the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. And together, we actively promote inclusion of all Canada's peoples through economic, social, and political life. As a government department, we hold up this mandate as a great source of pride. To be honest, I still pinch myself every day to think that I, as you are, part of the fabric of society to make and advance gender equality. At Wage, we deliver on our mandate by performing a critical central coordinating function within the Government of Canada, by developing and implementing policies, providing grants and contributions, delivering programs, investing in research, and providing advice to achieve equality for people of all genders. And I get to cross paths with so many of you who are tirelessly contributing your passion, your energy, and expertise to this cause. The tirelessly part is why it is so important to take a moment like this to pause, to acknowledge, and to feel how very remarkable it is that projects like this one are being rolled out. We at Wage and the Government of Canada as a whole recognize that economic abuse is a form of coercive controlling behavior that limits a victim's financial autonomy and leaves survivors indebted, socially isolated, traumatized, and without economic resources, making it a critical barrier for women to leave abusive relationships. In November 2022, the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence was launched by FPT ministers responsible for the status of women across Canada. This plan was informed by over 1,000 recommendations through years of engagement with Indigenous partners and a wide range of stakeholders, including victims, survivors, frontline service providers, community leaders, experts, academics, and civil society. This 10-year framework for action to create a Canada free of gender-based violence is guiding the national work and providing the leadership needed in order to advance efforts across the country to address multiple complex and deeply rooted factors that contribute to gender-based violence, such as economic abuse and coercive control. The Government of Canada made an investment of $539.3 million over 5 years. On my part, we started to talk about $500,000. It was a very significant moment in my career. I remember going home that night and saying, I'm now talking in billions. Pretty exciting. Good job to the movement. It came out, it was part of Budget 2022 to support the provinces and territories in their efforts to implement the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence. Women and Gender Equality worked with provincial and territorial governments to establish bilateral agreements that support each jurisdiction's work to end gender-based violence. These bilateral agreements are flexible in addressing each jurisdiction's respective needs, challenges, and priorities under 5 pillars. This is the foundation of the National Action Plan to gender-based violence, and it is what is guiding our efforts to end gender-based violence from coast to coast to coast. The exciting news is that as of December 2023, all agreements with every FPT in every province have been announced, and they are now available for you to check out on Wage's website. This collective effort is also being held up by our own federal GBV strategy, which is the federal contribution to the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence. It's led by my colleagues at Women and Gender Equality, and this strategy will work to prevent and address GBV by building on current federal initiatives, coordinating existing programs, and laying the foundation for greater action. We at WAGE envision a Canada where people of all genders, including women, are equal in every way and can achieve their full potential. What you are all gathered here today is on the path to this mandate. The Government of Canada will continue also to take strong action to ensure that women and girls and the 2S LGBTQIA+ people are safe, thriving, and present at decision-making tables now and in the future. And this could not be made possible without organizations like the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment and the development and the implementation of projects such as the one we're celebrating today. We are really thrilled and pleased and very honored to be present for the unveiling of the STEAR app, and truly it is a groundbreaking initiative, and it is there to support women and service providers in navigating the complexities of economic abuse within relationships. So thank you to the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment for inviting me to speak at this event and for all the important work that you do for victims and survivors of economic abuse in our community. And knowing many people on this call today and knowing what it is you do every day, day in, day out, I would like to close and acknowledge the personal energy and dedication that all of you bring to this important work with this affirmation. Our sensitivity is our strength and source of intuition. We care, but we do not carry. Taking care of our energy is our priority. We observe, but we do not absorb. We release what is not ours to feel, and we welcome the positive and uplifting vibrations that will no doubt come from this gathering you are doing today. So thank you very much. I pass the ball back to Nia.
Thank you so much for those amazing words, Joanna. And thank you for being here. It's absolutely amazing to have you here and to kick off our event with such inspiring words of wisdom. If we could go to the next slide, I'll just do a quick introduction to the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment, which is the only Canadian nonprofit which is dedicated to addressing economic abuse and economic injustice. We combat systemic barriers faced by economic abuse survivors through education, research, economic empowerment, and policy system change. We inform all of our work by evidence and lived experience of victims and survivors. And Joanna has already gone over a great definition of economic abuse, so I won't reiterate that here. Next slide, please. So the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment, our priorities are education on prevention and response to economic abuse, to develop all of our tools with community-based research and evidence, to inform policy and system change, and to build the capacity for nonprofits and social service providers, legal institutions, financial institutions, and victims and survivors. Next slide, please. We've also developed a wealth of resources over the past few years, which include 2 research studies that we did on economic abuse, which are the first research studies ever done in Canada on economic abuse as a whole in 2021 and 2022. We have also published the State of Economic Abuse Report, which is the first report in Canada that summarizes economic abuse initiatives and actions taken nationwide and internationally to document best practices on how to combat economic abuse. And we have developed multilingual resources and tools for victims and service providers, which are all available on our website. If you could go to the next slide. Something that was key that we launched just last year was our national policy scorecard that analyzed policies and legislations in all provinces and territories to assign them a score of how well they meet the needs of victims and survivors. This tool is particularly helpful for government and policymakers, along with social service providers, to understand the gender-based violence landscape from the perspective of victims and survivors. So each province and territory was given a score based on particular categories, which included, are there any designated legislated definitions of economic abuse within the province or territories? If their work and leave policies are inclusive of intimate partner violence victims and survivors, do the policies include litigation abuse protection or crime compensation or rental protections for survivors? So the highest scores across Canada were found in British Columbia, Quebec, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, and Ontario. And some of the lowest were found in Nova Scotia, Nunavut, and Yukon. You can access this tool on our website as well. And included on the website is the methodology and the statistics for each of the provinces and territories. Additionally, we had also launched our economic abuse screening tool for social service providers, which was piloted with shelters and social service providers, and which will be expanding to legal services as well. Next slide, please. So the reason that we went on this path to develop the STEAR app is in our 2021 research study, which was conducted in the Greater Ottawa region, 93% of survivors had noted that their money had been withheld. They had been prevented from accessing employment, health services, and as well as housing or schooling opportunities. Survivors also noted that appropriate services for their needs were overwhelming to navigate and difficult to find. The STEAR app sought to address these issues by creating a one-stop shop for women to be able to access all of these resources in one place. There's a short yes or no quiz in the beginning that helps direct survivors to areas of the app that holds the resources they need. And the app also aligns with the prevention and response pillars of Canada's National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence, and was developed in alignment with Canada's National Financial Literacy Strategy, of which CCFWE is an early adopter. At this time, I'd like to introduce my co-moderator today, Alia Rahman, who is the co-founder and CEO of Amplex Therapeutics, where she spends her time on the development of 2 non-invasive treatments for cervical precancer. She is also the co-chair of the GPV and Ending Female Genital Mutilation Canada board, and is a UI developer with a feminist lens. Alia also acted as a project manager on the STEAR app development. So I'm very pleased to have Alia here to co-moderate with me.
Thank you so much, Neha, for the generous and warm introduction, and for everybody who preceded me. So I'd like to discuss a little bit about the purpose of the app. So the app itself is a free, multilingual, user-friendly web and mobile-based platform, which centralizes safety, financial, and legal information for women experiencing intimate partner violence, which we'll refer to as IPV from here on out, and economic abuse. It includes a questionnaire guiding users to appropriate resources. STEAR fills a vital gap for IPV victims to access resources on economic abuse in multiple languages. As you can see here. In terms of the principles, the foundations of this app are rooted in being trauma-informed, based on a survivor's lived experience, with a focus on cultural sensitivity. CCFWE used our data and interviews from consultations for the National Action Plan to End Gender-Based Violence and economic abuse studies to understand the lived experiences of victims and survivors, to develop safety features to protect the victims. The app's language was reviewed by trauma-informed experts to reduce any perceived risks of psychological harm and to make it easy to understand economic abuse by using 6th grade level language. Additionally, with increasing immigration rates and an increase in racialized victims in Canada, the app is currently available in English and French, with Urdu, Hindi, and Arabic to follow later this week. And we're really very proud of that. And this, we believe, will fill a great need for ethnic and immigrant survivors as well. Next slide. Or is this? Okay, sorry. Wait, go back to the previous one. Sorry. All right. Just a few more notes on the app. This app was designed based on best practices from IPV apps such as PENDA, which is an Australian-based app, and the University of Western Ontario's MyPlan. Additionally, CCFWE added an element to reduce information overload for survivors who would likely already be suffering from the effects of trauma, anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. This was the basis for the introductory quiz, which I believe Julia is going to walk you through, so that it gives survivors an easy starting point to understand economic abuse and the next steps that they can take to empower themselves. We engaged the community to feed into the development of the app. as the initial content was assembled in collaboration with the University of Ottawa's Pro Bono Law Students Program. The content was then reviewed by trauma-informed experts, and as I mentioned previously, was written in a 6th grade language level to make it easy for everyone to understand. Additionally, a survey was sent to survivors and victims of CCFWE's financial literacy program to understand their perspectives on the app design and usability. These results will also inform version 2 of the app design. Community partners were also engaged to input their resources into the app so that women could find the resources they need easily. So thank you so much for your time. I would now like to introduce Julia Russo from New Markets, who was an absolute delight to work with. And she was the lead on developing the STEAR app itself. So I hand it over to Julia.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Aaliyah, for that. My name is Julia, and I am from New Markets. I was brought onto the CCFWE team as the app developer behind the screening tool for economic abuse recovery, also known as the STEAR app. And a bit about me is I've been in digital marketing and web design for the last 2 years, and it's always been important to me to do work with organizations that are making change in the world, especially for women. And with that being said, it's been such a pleasure to work with such an amazing group of people to develop something that's so meaningful and impactful. I'm really grateful that I was able to bring the CCFWE's vision to life with this app. It's a really important tool, and I'm glad that organizations like the CCFWE are out here creating things like this and resources and tools for the future. So without further ado, let's get into the app design and interface. I'm going to finish off by giving everyone a little bit of a live demo of the website version of the app. It's available now on the App Store and Google Play, but it's also available as an in-browser app, so people can access it online without having to download it onto their phone. Next slide, please. So when we were creating the app, there were 3 goals that we sort of kept in the back of our mind throughout the whole thing. We wanted STEAR to be educational, we wanted it to have resources, and we, above all, I think, as my job as the designer was to communicate safety and ensure that there was safety around the app. So, we did want to equip survivors with knowledge about economic abuse and give them names to put to their experiences. We did want to fill it with resources such as like legal aid, financial assistance, things about tax and benefits. And all these resources are province specific. So when you put in what province you're from, it'll show you what resources are applicable to you specifically. And then the most important part, like I was saying, was the safety aspect of it. There are a lot of security measures that are put in place to make sure there's no personally identifiable information disclosed, that would allow anybody to sort of track an individual user back to the app or back to their responses. Instead, we have features such as a one-time PIN, a lock feature, an anonymous feedback form that protect the user's identity while allowing them to experience the full benefits of the app. Next slide, please. So this safety sort of expanded into the user interface, and that came from creating the app from best practices. So like Leah had mentioned, the My Plan app was a big motivation in the flow of the actual app. And I did want to give a big shout out to you because I know there was many hours that we spent going through colors, images, design, and I know that font and everything seems like such a small part to an app, but when you put everything together, it is really important that these small things come together to create a very gentle and informative interface. We do want this to be an app that's accessible to diverse cultures and backgrounds, so it's important to remove any ambiguity and really have the essence of the app transcend linguistic barriers. So when we go through the app, you'll probably notice a lot of gentle colors. The images are very soft and nurturing, and there was meaning behind all of that. Next slide, please. And the last thing I just wanted to touch on before we actually go through the app is, again, the security and the feedback measures. Security was top of mind, of course, as I'm going to keep reiterating because it was very important to us. So some key features are that there are no usernames or passwords. So when survivors access the app, they won't be required to make an account or make a login. And this is again so that nobody can sort of track back their answers or their usage to the specific user. Instead, what we've implemented is a one-time PIN, and this PIN resets every session, but you're required to put it in at the beginning of your session, and it activates a lock feature, which I will again show you later, but the lock feature pops up a Pinterest-looking sort of page in case you feel like you're being watched or you want to sort of hide what you're doing. Within the app too, there is this easy yes or no quiz that you can go through that sort of lets you explore the situation you're in a bit more and will direct you to resources. And none of that information is stored in the website. It's actually stored in the back end and cannot be tracked back to users once again. The only method we have for sort of tracking user behavior is Google Analytics, and we use it because it's not going to track specific IP addresses, but instead give us information about the demographics of the users. So how old are the people that are using our app? What pages do they stay on the longest? What are they visiting constantly? And this will give us a better idea for future planning in the app, what people want to see, who's using it, what resources we should show, and things like this. So for feedback measures, we do have an anonymous feedback form within the app. The only time we will ask for personally identifiable information is if you want to hear a response back from CCFWE. And that's because there is no other way to know who's asking the question or how to contact the user if they don't provide their email. So we do make it known that like you are disclosing this information and we will need to keep track of that information if it's something you are interested in. Otherwise, you can submit it anonymously, and again, nothing will be tracked back to you. And then of course, people can leave App Store ratings for feedback. That is not so anonymous because it is tracked back to your Apple account. So I think the feedback form is our best bet, but of course, these are also other options. So I think now I'm going to walk you through the app. I am going to share my desktop. All right, can everybody see? Yes.
We can see. Thank you.
Awesome, no problem. So if you log in and you do STEAR.app, you will be brought to this landing page where it tells you just a little bit about the app, what topics we cover, and you can click through here, one app everywhere. It'll tell you can download on the App Store, download on the Google Store. But like I said, we're going to be using the web version today. So we can use the app in our browser. First thing it's going to ask you is obviously what language you speak. And like it was mentioned, there is going to be Urdu, Hindi, and Arabic added later this week. But right now we have English and French. Because I'm predominantly an English speaker, I'm going to go through this version. So here it does ask you to put in your province. This is so that the resources can be tailored to the specific user and where they are. But again, we cannot really track you down with this information. So it's very discreet. I'm going to say I'm using it for myself. Next, you're sort of brought to this welcome screen. So it goes through what the app is about. It has a privacy policy you can check out before you get into the app. Basically like a nice little summary page. And then this is the part where you set up your PIN. So we did leave a little note here for users that basically they shouldn't choose 0000 for their PIN, because in the situation where they do have the lock screen up and someone were to be like, oh, what's this PIN feature? Like unlock it. If you put 0000 in, the lock screen will pop up again and it just sort of looks like a continuous feedback. So they don't know what app you're using. So I'm going to go ahead and make 5555 my login. Yeah, so this is the app. And the first little part here goes through how to use the app. You can click through it at your own speed or it'll auto rotate and it'll let you know what the quiz is. It has like a quick note on some of the language just to make sure that we're being as explicit as possible. And again, removing that ambiguity. But this is the main dashboard. So here we have the economic abuse quiz, which we can be taken to. We have information surrounding what is economic abuse and safety planning. We have a glossary full of definitions, and that is mainly because a lot of words can have double meanings. So we want to define it the way we're using it. So going through all of this, when you get into like this section, there is a lot of information. And so to make this a little bit more digestible, we have these links up here that let you go to specific subtopics you want to see. So if you're interested in economic abuse post-separation, you can click that. It'll bring you to that specific section for you to scroll through. Yeah, so that's just a way to make it a little bit more digestible. When you go back to home, you can go to safety planning here, and we have the same situation set up with if you're in a relationship, if you're leaving a relationship, bank accounts, any sort of sub information that you want to get to, you can get to easily here. And the resource page is broken into the different resources. So if you're looking for like workplace safety, if you're looking for legal support, if you're looking for credit report, score and debit, these are the subsections that you can go into to find out like a little bit more detail about what it is you're looking at and then what resources you can receive. The way this is designed too with like the province specific stuff is that you go in and it'll show you like general resources for all of Canada. And then depending on what province you selected, if there are province specific resources, it'll appear. If not, it'll just give you the general Canadian one. Yeah, so this is sort of laid out to be as organized as possible. We didn't want people to have to sort through to like a million resources if they're looking for, you know, immigration support resources specifically or workplace safety specifically. Yeah, so that's the resource page. The glossary, as we had mentioned, just has a lot of definitions. And when these words are mentioned throughout the app, they do link back to the glossary. So if someone is reading it in real time and is a bit like, oh, what does this mean? It'll bring them right to the glossary. And then we have a little about the app section too, to sort of talk about CCFWE, terms and conditions, a privacy policy, and just like the funding partners, disclaimers, all of that fun stuff. This is the feedback form we were talking about earlier. So here you can leave your feedback and you can leave it completely anonymous and submit, or you can put your first name and your email. This is the little note that we have left for people to read through, just to let them know that if they do submit their email, obviously that information will have to be disclosed. And then there's a settings feature, so you can go in between the languages if you would like. Or you can go in between the provinces if you want to search for different provincial resources. And I guess the quiz too is something big we should probably go through. So you start off the quiz, and as it states, it's there to identify if you or someone you care about has experienced economic abuse. And the questions are very situational to sort of get you a sense of like your experience. So does your ex-partner restrict you from accessing money, a job, education, or other resources you need for yourself and your family? You answer yes or no, and you move through the quiz. I won't go through every question, but just so you get the essence of it, do you feel you have a general understanding of the family's financial situation? It's sort of just to like place you in your experience and where you're at. So let's say we go through the whole quiz answering the questions. I'm just answering these at random right now, but obviously it's meant to like take time to go through. So once you get to the end of the quiz, it brings you to this whole resource page where it goes through all the questions and the responses. So it'll let you know a bit about what economic abuse is. If this sounds like you, here are some resources you can check out. And it sort of does that for every question that we went through. So it just lets you know, like, if this was your answer to this question, these are specific resources that you might find accessible and helpful. So yeah, that was a very big part of this project. I'm very proud of this part. And yeah, these all linked to like different resources. Yeah, link out in the
Julia, I am wondering, what is that fun lock button on the far right side?
Yes, yeah, I was saving that for last. We're getting there.
Oh,
But the lock feature, which was probably the most critical part of this whole app, um, is what I was talking about with the pin. So if someone does feel like they want to be secure about what they're doing, they can hit this lock button and they're brought to this like Pinterest looking page that sort of just looks like they're scrolling through some like art, some must-try recipes for gathering with friends, little like DIY craft projects. And yeah, it's just supposed to be a bit of a decoy. This page can also be edited too to be whatever you want it. Or let's say like in a year, we want to switch out the images because it's been a year. Totally fine. But this is just supposed to be a little bit of like a safety measure. And if I want to access the app again, it's going to throw up this. So if I put in the wrong pin, it's not going to let me back in. And if I put in 000, it's going to bring me back here. So that is that safety measure that we were talking about. If someone's like, you know, unlock this thing for me, I need to see it. It'll bring you back here. So you don't have to disclose what the app was about. But ultimately, if I put in my PIN of 5555, it's going to bring me back to the home screen so I can continue browsing and doing what I was doing in the app. And yeah, that's the basics of the app. I'm excited to keep developing it and keep working with CCFWE to improve. I'm excited to hear your feedback, but at this time, I would love to take any questions that you guys have.
thanks so much, Julia, for the walkthrough. I can already see there's a lot of excitement in the chat about the layout and the design, and the lock feature, of course. So I do have a couple of questions in our Q&A. If people can't be tracked down, how do you trace if someone was hacked or if, say, an abuser did something wrong?
That's a good question. I guess we're not exactly like storing any of this information. So if they got hacked, I'm not sure that any of their information would really be up for grabs. Like every session sort of restarts as a new session. So if they were hacked, it wouldn't necessarily expose like any of their answers. It wouldn't expose any links that they've previously visited. So I'm not sure that's like a huge concern. I don't know if I answered that correctly.
Yes, no, you are right. We did have to make some decisions on privacy and safety. So because we chose not to monitor anyone's safety or store any information in the app, unfortunately, we won't be able to tell if anyone was hacked or anything like that. But as a countermeasure, we have that lock feature that can help prevent an abuser from knowing what the app is really for. I know that we had a similar question like that in the Q&A as well. I do see there are some other Q&As. I might hold some of those for our Q&A discussion for the panel because some of them are very policy specific questions. And I'll try to answer those as well as we go along in the webinar. But I would just like to thank Julia for giving us an amazing walkthrough of the app. And like I said, you can see all of, like Julia said, like all of that is available on the mobile app version as well. But the web app is for people who don't want to download and store something on their app where their potential partner could view the app if that was a privacy a privacy concern. Fantastic. Okay, we are now going to move on to the next part of our event, which is for our panel introduction. So Johannes, so our first panelist is Neka McGregor. She is a co-founder of Women at the Center. She has dedicated herself to supporting survivors of gender-based violence and advises the Canadian Femicide Observatory and serves on the Federal Advisory Council on Gender-Based Violence. Additionally, she also co-founded the Black Femicide Canadian Council, earning recognition with awards like the 2019 Pink Concussions Award. Recently, she was also appointed activist in residence at the University of Guelph. We're very glad to have you here, Neka.
Thank you.
We also have with us today Mark Hull-Jacquin, who founded Shelter Movers during parental leave in 2016, who's very productive during his parental leave, creating a survivor-centered moving service in collaboration with women's shelters. Shelter Movers is the only service of its kind in Canada, and it fills a crucial gap in the social safety net by moving thousands of survivors annually, engaging volunteers across 9 cities. Thank you, Mark. Over to Alia.
All right. Next up is the incredible Miss Harmy Mendoza. Harmy is the executive director at Women Act. She leads efforts to eradicate gender-based violence via community mobilization, research, policy, and education. With 16 plus years in equity and diversity, she is a results-driven leader employing an intersectional anti-oppression framework to her work. Her strategic mindset has positively impacted policies benefiting vulnerable populations. Welcome, Harmy.
Welcome. Hi, everyone.
All right. And next up is Yasmin Youssef. As executive director of the NISA Foundation, Yasmin leads initiatives aiding immigrant women. She leads NISA Homes, a refuge for those fleeing abuse. She oversees NISA Helpline, a platform that provides counseling. She also developed NISA Learning, an education program. With a decade of social services experience, Yasmin champions survivor empowerment. She joined NISA Homes in 2015, driven by her passion. Outside work, she's a dedicated mother and finds solace in painting and nurturing her creativity. Welcome, Yasmin. Yasmin there?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, welcome. All right, so I'm going to kick off some of the panel questions. So the first one is for Neka. How do you see technology currently hindering efforts to eradicate gender-based violence? And what role can nonprofits specifically play in overcoming these challenges?
Well, thank you so much, first of all, for having me on. And that is the most fantastic app. So congratulations to the whole team. I was actually talking about this with my staff over a few days ago, and we recognize that technology is itself a hindrance when it's used as a tool to facilitate gender-based violence. And when you think about AI-generated videos like these deep fakes that takes women's faces and superimposes them onto, for example, porn sites, that's a form of tech-facilitated gender-based violence. And we've seen examples of when technology is used for purposes of like criminal harassment, stalking, and tracking of survivors by their exes. And I know that technology is seen as ubiquitous, right? And there's an expectation that everyone is equally savvy and technologically literate, but we know it's not true because there are some members of the community that lack tech-related knowledge or tech access. And I'm thinking of elderly victims of violence, elderly victims of elder abuse, those who are living in isolation and being deprived technology, which is oftentimes their only means of communication or connection with others. And I also think very quickly that technology is, it has risks. There are risks that technology poses, especially amongst younger generation who we've seen instances where they may share things online with somebody that they trust, and only for those images to then be used without their consent. And so we think about ways that abusers will use technology to, for example, instigate an argument with their current partner and then film the partner responding, and then use that response as a way to, attack them in family court of claims of parental alienation, as an example. So all of this exacerbates gender-based violence. And I think that in terms of what roles we can play, I know that there are a couple of shelters that are doing some really amazing safer planning work, like the folks at the Redwood, Abiyaji Bolade and her incredible team at the Redwood are doing this. They're incorporating technology-related safer planning in their shelters as a way to give survivors technology literacy. so that they are aware. And then thinking about prevention strategies, I think that we as a sector can do a lot more to educate community broadly about the do's and don'ts of technology usage so that they can become, society can become more tech savvy around the many types of technology related gender-based violence.
Beautiful answer, Nneka. And I believe Messi has something that she'd like to add to your response. Messi, I see your hand is up.
An applause reaction.
Okay. Okay. So she really agreed with it. All right. Thank you so much for that, Nneka. My next question is for Yasmin. Yasmin, what cultural sensitivities should digital initiatives like apps or e-learning platforms be aware of? How do you see mobile apps or digital initiatives like this one helping to reclaim the digital space for survivors? And what impact do you anticipate this having on their safety and their empowerment? I know that's a lot of questions in one, but I encourage you to go with it.
Sounds good. No, thank you so much. I do think that the first thing I was very happy to see was that it is available in different languages. I think that's like the very basic starting point when we are looking to make things accessible to different cultures and different communities. I do think that part of that also does include the content. So I know, especially now with a lot of apps and a lot of like widgets and things, you can easily just get like a Google Translate app attached to it or installed on it, and it will just translate word for word, which often is not the most effective way of translating or providing that that content effectively. So having that content be not just translated through an app, but actually have someone who takes the time to translate it and interpret it while maintaining the meaning behind the content, I think is very important. But then the next step is also looking at content that can be culturally responsive. Maybe there are sections you can have in the app that are related to different communities, including the resources, for example. There are many culturally responsive resources in different pockets across Canada, and it could be a great way to include those resources on the app that are not necessarily addressing intimate partner violence or economic abuse, but they could be a resource for that client in navigating the experience and connecting and maybe finding employment, things like that, but also in information. A lot of times, I work heavily with the immigrant, with an immigrant community that has different practices back home, right? The way they approach finances is different, and having that be understood and implemented within the app would definitely be helpful, because it can, for many communities, there is that stigma around, discussing finances in the home, or in terms of just, maybe even understanding, is what I'm doing because it's cultural, is that wrong? Which it not necessarily is, right? It could be that it's just a different way of practicing things, doesn't mean one way is right or wrong. But if there are ways of including that, maybe having those resources as a, as a document or as information, or as, I saw different pages on the app. Maybe there is a page that can be specific to Indigenous communities, a page that is specific to South Asian communities, or, many other communities, but having those sections that can make them feel like, okay, they understand where I'm coming from, they understand my experiences, they're able to, I'm able to use this app in the way that works best for me, and not just a one size fits all. It's different languages, but it's, it's the same content, because it doesn't apply to everyone in the exact same way. Not everyone's experience is going to be the same. So I do think that, above and beyond the language piece, adding those cultural nuances, those cultural understandings, those references can also be super helpful for making it culturally responsive. Another part is also just reviewing the content too, right? Having those opportunities for people to give feedback, for users to also give feedback, which I know you do have, which is great. But that is definitely a way of making it culturally responsive, because you're able to get their feedback, maybe have a question specifically around that, and that way you're able to, if there are blind spots that we have, and we all have them, but we're able to get those who are actually using it to provide us with that information. And I think going back to your question overall in terms of like the benefit of that, I suppose it's, we do live in Canada. It's a multicultural society. We're always talking about, Canada's a multicultural country, and we love that aspect of it. Many of us are immigrants, myself included, and we've made Canada our home. But I think it's at a point where, we can't just assume that, like I said, a one-size-fits-all model. Just because we're saying we're multicultural, how are we implementing that? How are we making sure that everyone does feel included and does feel supported and does feel like they're not the other, they're not the outsider, and that comes in when it's not something that they have to ask for. So a lot of times, when we are looking for cultural accommodations, it's something where they have to go out of their way to be like, do you have this in a different language? Do you have this resource for me? Do you have this information for me? For a lot of, especially, anyone experiencing gender-based violence or anyone experiencing intimate partner violence, we know it's very hard to reach out for help. We know it's very challenging to, put yourself in that situation. And especially if you start getting support, it feels very difficult for a lot of clients to feel like, okay, they already helped me so much, now I'm asking for more, and it makes it difficult. So we want to try and bridge that gap to avoid them from having to come and ask for every single thing that they need. We want to try and, be aware, be prepared, and have that available without them having to ask. So essentially putting the onus on us as a service provider to be able to already be prepared and know what would be needed. That requires connecting to organizations that are culturally responsive or culturally specific. So, as I mentioned earlier, I think being connected to culturally specific organizations throughout Canada, having that as a resource on there, but also maybe asking them, how can we make this as culturally responsive so that your community is able to benefit from this just like every other community? There should be no barrier in accessing that because like they have to get a specific version that is only applicable to them. It should be just as smooth of an experience as everyone else using the app would have. So I hope that answers the questions, the many questions.
Yasmin, I have so many ideas for a version 2 now. And so thank you. You've gotten all the creative juices going. All right. So my next question is for Harmy. In implementing digital solutions, such as e-learning or navigation tools, what challenges has your organization observed in providing effective support to service users who've experienced gender-based violence? And how have you navigated these challenges to ensure accessibility and impact? Another layered question. So Harmy, please take it away.
Of course, I hope you can hear me. I can't see myself, but I hope you can hear me. There you go. Now I can see myself. Thank you. I just want to make sure that you could hear me. Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. I am so happy. I am truly excited about the work that you're doing, and thank you for doing it. Happy to share some of our learnings, especially in our journey of implementing digital solutions, particularly e-learning modules geared towards service providers and service users. We've encountered various challenges in providing effective support. I'd like to share some key learnings and strategies we've employed to navigate these challenges. This is mostly about ensuring accessibility and impact. Firstly, it is crucial to recognize that survivors are at different points in their healing journey. Some may not be ready to leave an abusive relationship and are seeking information to enhance their safety, while others may have recently left or have been independent for years. And so to address this, our resources and content must acknowledge the ongoing nature of healing. We incorporate trauma-informed and empowering language that emphasizes survivors' choices, catering to the diverse needs of individuals at various stages in their healing journey. However, this approach presents a challenge in itself. Crafting content that resonates with individuals in different stages of their healing journey requires a delicate balance. For instance, creating material that supports those yet who are not ready to leave, while also providing valuable insights for those who have already taken steps toward independence, is an ongoing challenge that we actively address in our module development. Um, Secondly, we understand the importance of evidence-based information that reflects the nuances of survivors' experiences. Research literature, such as the vulnerability of older survivors, for example, due to aging and income inequality, informs our e-learning modules. Yet, adapting our content to be intersectional, considering factors like age, race, and socioeconomic status, poses another challenge. Our aim is to strike the right balance to be inclusive and sensitive to these differences while providing relevant information. On a similar note, delivering complex information in a user-friendly manner is essential for accessibility and impact. We collaborate very closely with our communications coordinator to design engaging tools that extend the usefulness of our e-learning modules. For example, modules that are asynchronous or micro e-lessons that are no more than 15 minutes long, videos embedded within the modules, downloadable job aids for service providers, and graphics for knowledge mobilization. Our objective is to ensure our modules are comprehensive and evidence-based while also being digestible and engaging for service providers. Striving for simplicity without compromising accuracy is an ongoing effort that shapes our approach to content development. So in summary, addressing the challenges in supporting survivors of gender-based violence through digital solutions requires a multifaceted approach, acknowledging the diverse stages of survivors' healing journeys, incorporating evidence-based information, actively involving survivors in the development process, and delivering information in a user-friendly manner are crucial aspects of our strategy. By staying responsive to survivors' needs and leveraging technology effectively, we aim to create impactful and accessible solutions for service providers, ultimately contributing to the collective effort in ending gender-based violence, like all of my counterparts here today. Thank you. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you so much, Harmy. And just to summarize that, you're saying that we need resources that are both culturally sensitive, very inclusive, and yet don't compromise on getting the message across to that specific group. And that's a hard balance to strike, but we have tried our best in this. So thank you so much for that answer. I'll now pass it on to Neha, who's going to take over from here to ask the remainder of the questions. So take it away.
Thank you. Mark, I'm coming to you. I'm wondering, Mark, if looking into the future, are there any emerging technologies or services that you would like to introduce, or you think that social service providers can introduce when working to mobilize their efforts in supporting survivors and victims?
Yeah, hi Nia. Hi everybody. Thank you for having me today. And I was really fascinated by this question when we received it. Shelter Movers operates nationally. We're this a free moving and storage service for survivors. And I say that because we need to be able to operate in a really standardized way. We need to listen to survivors and we need to adapt our service to their needs, as you've heard from the other panelists. When I look at our sector and I look at other sectors in society, say the financial services, if we have an investment portfolio, we can have a consolidation of those investments in one place. If we're a healthcare user, we have e-records that allow us to access our files, in some provinces at least, in a secure and confidential way, and helps us navigate the complex system. When I look at our sector in the GBV sector, I just don't see that yet. I look at our organizations and we all do incredibly important work. We try not to be siloed. We try to operate in an integrated, holistic manner that responds to survivors' priorities. But I say this as a member of the community, we're not there. And I think this app is a very important step towards providing survivors with a one-stop shop, at least in the financial abuse portion of the GBV ecosystem. Now we have finally an app that allows that to happen. I think this is an indicator to me of our sector's lagging trend in leveraging technology to support survivors, and by making the system easy for survivors to use, and not only for privileged, Canadians who are educated, but for everyone who needs it. I think internally at Shelter Movers, we've developed what we call Move Hub. It's an internal platform that allows our moves to be coordinated in a really streamlined way, in a secure and confidential way, regardless of where it happens in the country. And I'm looking to our sector, and I hope my office can be helpful in this, to help us find ways to use technology, in-house built technology that allows our organizations to operate in service to survivors, and makes it easier for them to communicate with multiple service providers simultaneously in a safe way, and where they permit it, allowing multiple service providers to understand the other services that those survivors are using. So I'll mention Yasmin's office and NISA Homes. So we receive referrals from NISA Homes on a regular basis in multiple parts of the country. They're an important partner of ours. It would be incredibly useful for Shelter Movers to know if a client wants to access NISA Homes, and how we can be of service to that, because we have a great relationship with this organization. If the client can't contact them directly, or if they want to use us as a conduit, or if there's an app that allows the client to contact the closest NISA Homes and Shelter Movers so she can leave her partner quickly and efficiently, this could save lives, and it would be an integrated and relatively simple, to be honest, way of bringing our organizations around the client faster and in a more respectful manner. So I would just talk about systems at a systems level. We need to use technology as other sectors do to integrate better. And then I'll just want to, again, from a systems level, just comment on Neka's excellent point about in my opinion, about the risks of technology, and as service providers, how we advise and support survivors in the use of technology, and the risks. I believe as a sector, we need to do better at informing ourselves on the advances in technology that are being used to coerce and control survivors, so that when we're giving advice, it's based on the best data. We know AirTags are being put in people's purses and in their cars. That's old news. That's 4 or 5 years old. We're way past that now. And in my office, we're constantly telling clients to keep an eye out and search their purses and their coat liners and all that. That's all. The people who are using technology to coerce and control survivors are way past that. And so we need to stay on top of that ourselves as a sector. If we're going to be useful to survivors, we need to be the best informed that we can be.
Thanks so much, Mark. I completely agree. Hopefully this app and getting all of us together like this moves us in a direction to be more coordinated and collaborative when moving towards helping victims and survivors. With that, I have a question for all the panelists just now. Some of the panelists already spoke to some of their favorite features of the app, but hearing of the main features of the STEAR app right now, which ones stand out to you that would best help economic abuse recovery? And what features would you like to see amended, or what new features do you think could be added in the next iteration of the app as we continue development? And I'll invite anyone to unmute themselves to respond to this one.
I'll go.
Thanks, Neka.
So 2 things, just to go back to what Mark was saying and following up for me. I think we as a sector are also not immune from technology violence, right? So there have been instances where one is hosting a webinar or having a meeting, and then we're hacked, right? And then obscene images are put. And so as I was looking through the app earlier on, I think it's not just fantastic for survivors, it's also an educational opportunity for the sector, for those who are providing supports to survivors, for us to learn, right? For people in the sector to learn about economic abuse. I know survivors who live it have a sort of intuitive understanding of it, but I'm not sure how how informed the sector itself is. And so I see this as an opportunity to educate those who are providing supports to survivors. And then I love the languages. I think that is absolutely brilliant. I read in the chat, somebody was asking about opportunities for expanding and including Indigenous languages. I think that would be like cherry on the icing on the cake. That would be wonderful. But just to expand the knowledge base of it, so that the individuals who are doing frontline supports to survivors of economic abuse can also understand a little bit more about what it means.
Thank you. Thanks, Nneka. Go ahead, Harmy.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I think Mark had his hand.
Go
I don't
ahead.
wanna.
No,
Go ahead,
Harmy,
Mark.
please,
Yeah.
Harmy, go ahead. I can wait.
I didn't see your hand, Mark. Um, this is gonna be a bit thought-provoking, and I want to please push back at any time. Um, it's amazing. I think today is a party for me. This is a reason to celebrate. It's awesome. And as I was going through the app, one of the questions that came to my mind is, um, it, how about some sort of screening slash assessing component to it, because I totally see it as a support tool. But like I said, um, survivors are in a healing journey, and some of them may start identify some signs, right? And it would be super helpful to have a screening or assessment feature on economic abuse. And going back to the idea of also including our service providers, right? Is this something that we can even use in terms of our own service provision? So that's it in terms of what it comes to mind as to potential additions to the app. And thank you for doing this. I think it's so needed.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Harmy.
much, Harmy.
I just want to add to that, and perhaps Sneha does as well. We do have an intake quiz when the app is initially opened, and it's a series of fairly straightforward yes/no questions that then actually do give the user specific feedback in terms of what sections they should review. However, it's not a full assessment tool because there are some legal restrictions on that, let's say. So we do have that intake quiz, but we welcome your feedback on how we could improve it for version 2. Yasmin, do you want to add something as well?
I did, but I don't know if Mark earlier had
Mark
something
had
to say. No?
That's right. I think Mark had something.
I did. I put my hand on. Just very quickly, I've never downloaded an app that was ever perfect in version 1, nor have I ever downloaded an app that was totally complete and could never be improved upon. I think patience and understanding of this is a next level for our sector to have this kind of app. I think it's very important to acknowledge that in and of itself is an achievement that we should be celebrating. And will the app have everything we need all the time and have every name of every resource? No, obviously, I would never expect that, and that's not reasonable. I think your office has made a great first version of this that we can rely on, and you'll only continue to improve. And so I commend that, and I think your openness to receiving feedback. And I'm assuming there's a V2 development plan team already looking at all the comments and remaining transparent with what users can expect in the future. I think is very important as a expectation setting process to keep your community of users engaged. This is a bit more sensitive because you have survivors using it who may or may not be able to get those updates in advance, but certainly service providers who are experts, I think, can probably be a great resource to you that that can just continue to endorse what you're doing.
Thank you. Yasmin?
Yeah, I think going off of what Mark had mentioned earlier, I think that using this also as a best practices opportunity for, I mean, this is about economic abuse. Like I see this being something that can be applied to many different forms of abuse, something that can, you know, again, like Mark said, we're a little behind as a sector, and I know there's, you know, funding issues and all of that, but I do hope that maybe using this as an opportunity for a best practices model for future apps and future projects that are like this, I think would be very, very helpful. I also think that in terms of like maybe some of the resources on there, I do think there's a lot of opportunity to connect with other like types of abuse and kind of maybe show the interconnectedness of many forms of abuse, because that is the reality more often than not. You know, women or anyone that is experiencing abuse is experiencing multiple forms at the same time. And so kind of maybe providing a bit more resources when it comes to that piece of like, okay, how do I navigate the multiple experiences that I'm going through? I'm not really sure how. I apologize. I'm giving ideas, and hopefully you can take that and run with it. And the last idea I had was also in terms of even the economic abuse, but maybe having some sort of a checklist to help them with, you know, how to get back on their feet. A lot of times it is overwhelming when you are experiencing abuse and you're trying to, you know, figure things out in order to, let's be very honest, one of the main reasons that survivors stay is because they don't know how they're going to support themselves and their families. One of the main reasons they stay is because, you know, in this current climate where cost of living is out of control, the most practical thing for them is how am I going to pay to put food on the table and to pay my rent and to do those very basic things if they are thinking about leaving, or if they're in a situation where they are on their own all of a sudden. So having some sort of maybe checklist or a way to navigate that piece of like, you know, getting on your own 2 feet. I know I did see, you know, employment resources and that kind of thing, which is very helpful, but also just, you know, breaking it down so that that overwhelming nature of this experience is minimized to some degree.
Thanks, Yasmin. You're absolutely right about all the different intersecting pieces of abuse that someone can experience. And we do our best to address that in the economic, like what is economic abuse sections, where we have the economic abuse power wheel and control wheels that sort of show how psychological, physical, and other types of abuse all coalesce as part of the economic abuse spectrum. But hopefully in the future we can build off a little bit more on that, have more of a cohesive resources sections that can address all of those different aspects as well. Well, thank you. I
Right.
wonder if go ahead, Alia, go ahead.
Well, we have maybe 5 minutes for remaining questions before Messi gives her closing remarks.
Yes. So if there are any other questions, there are Q&As that were coming in through the chat. We have answered most of them, just typing out the answers. But if there are any other questions, we'd happy to have them put into the Q&A. Yes, Michelle, I can see you have a question if you'd like to put that in the Q&A or in the chat itself. Unfortunately, because this is webinar mode, we can't, it doesn't allow participants to unmute or show their face, but we're happy to take your written question via the question and answers or in the chat. But while you type that, there was a question that I thought was really interesting that someone put in earlier, which was, let me just find it. So what happens to victims that were victims due to financial abuse that have no official jurisdiction and have no access to internet? I wonder if anyone on the panel or Alia, if you would like to address that. Like if survivors don't have access to internet, what what can they do then?
Mhm. I feel like one of our incredible panelists would be really well suited to answer that.
Mhm.
I'll just say from the perspective of the app, there are Canada-wide resources. So let's say if the person is not located in any specific province permanently, there are some national resources that are available. So that's one way of looking at it. But for somebody who doesn't have access to internet, yes, a public library would probably be a good option, but perhaps Mark or Neka or Harmy, do you have any thoughts?
I saw Yasmin unmute for a quick second, so.
I was just gonna say, yeah, libraries, like, I mean, a lot of like cafes and restaurants and places now do have free Wi-Fi. Obviously that does definitely, it doesn't make it fully accessible. But a lot of people don't have phones, right? I mean, there's a lot of barriers. But that is like, there is a lot of opportunities to connect to free public Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just we point folks to settlement.org, and there's a website there that specifically lists out areas that provide free computers or free internet and computers for anonymity and to avoid risk of being tracked or hacked. We're conscious to be careful about suggesting folks use unsecured Wi-Fi networks like Starbucks or any other sort of commercial Wi-Fi that can be observed pretty closely. But so again, like, is our system equipped to provide people with safe, secure ways of accessing the internet? Not sure about that. But this is a measure of risk and benefit, and if she needs to get the internet, she may have to accept a degree of risk to do that. Yeah, I would just stop there. I think it's a complicated question. Lots of people in our country don't have access to internet. They don't have a reliable phone, or they don't have reliable internet. And even if they do, they may not speak the language or feel competent or confident enough to even use the technology, assuming they have it. So it's layered. But purely from a technical perspective, sure, they can go to a local restaurant and try to pick up the free Wi-Fi and get the information and then get off. And if it's using this particular app, we know that it won't be collecting their personal data. So it's a very secure way of doing that.
Thank you, Mark. I just see another question about how this information can be shared with the real estate industry. So this webinar is recorded, so it will be shared in a week on YouTube. We are now coming to a close of our question and answer session. So just to keep within the time that we have allotted, I know we tried to get through a lot today, so I really appreciate everybody's active engagement in the Q&A and in the chat as well. But I would like to move on to the closing remarks. So I'd like to introduce our fearless leader, the Executive Director and founder of the Canadian Centre for Women's Empowerment, Meseret Hilieses, to deliver the closing remarks for the session.
And everyone, my team members, as I said, we are a very small organization. We don't have a lot of even resources, but my team passion, energy, expertise, just you name it, because this is a collective work. So Alia, Neha, Johanna, Nerida, Patrick, thank you so much. And in terms of content creation, there's a lot of expertise and people are involved in this document. Jessica, Michaela, Dr. Snow, Neha, Patrick, Dr. Andrea. You know, I want to name these people because these are the people who have been behind this work. This app it's not just a technological tool. It's all about our commitment to enhancing the lives of victims and simplifying their everyday experience. And also it's a pathway for their economic security, because resources are key for a victim to heal, to thrive, to build the economy. So as service providers and as advocates, we believe that survivors should not be traumatized. We need to provide some very simple, accessible, a one-stop shop, resources. So I hope the commitment on the National Action Plan and the investment will enable us to develop more resources. This is as a beginning to conduct more research. Data is very crucial to develop resources, to inform also our policy, and of course to build also the capacities of our service providers, which is very, very important because our research has also showed us still there is a huge gap in Canada to address those gaps. So we'll continue expanding this app. This is the beginning. We'll continue also including your, feedback. Definitely, as you know, app is like first phase is like it's just first phases. Definitely, we'll have a revision time, and also we'll update you. Just to make it short, I know time is over. I urge you to download this app. I hope we have close to 80 something people. I'm not sure how many people are still now, but we'll have a lot of download and then explore the feature. Provide us also your valuable feedback. This is an instrumental for us in shaping and continued evolution of this success. Continue sharing also the link on your newsletter. We're very happy to see everywhere. If you are a victim of economic abuse, gender-based violence, please contact us as info@ccfwe. It's a very confidential, email. We'd love to send you a very confidential, opinions form. So if you are okay, we're very happy also to hear your thought and then to include your voice in this app. And join us also on the Help Us Rise 2024. As you know, Help Us Rise is the first Canadian national awareness campaign on economic abuse. Every year, we reached 100+ cities across Canada, including all levels of government, to mobilize resources and to raise awareness on economic abuse. We're always looking at a partner, supporter. We're very happy to have that. And if you are a victim in Ontario, you can join our My Money, My Freedom program. That's also the first Canadian domestic abuse financial literacy program designed specifically for survivors. And of course, if you are a decision makers, if you are also an advocate and a researcher as well, you can check our website, our territorial and provincial policy scorecard. That would be very good resources. And you can learn also about how your province is responding economic abuse. If you are also writers, come and write for us. We need a lot of information and resources. And this is a lot of exciting also information will come soon, but we need more people. And as organization as a small team, definitely will continue developing our resources in collaboration with your amazing, supporters. We'll also continue building our intersectional lens and risk-based research, which is the most important thing. We need to have that. And of course, we'll also continue advocating for economic equity. So let us do what we can, and every woman can live free from fear. Freedom and dignity is the most important thing to ensure women economic justice. As I said, tomorrow it's a very big day for us. Our petition will be tabled at the House of Commons. We're gonna share you our press release. Feel free to share widely. Hopefully we'll have International Recognition Day. As you know, November 26th it's a national day, but it's only recognized by the province and the cities. And of course, internationally also it's recognized in United States, Australia, New Zealand, and Israel and South Africa. But federally, we really need that because of getting a proclamation. It takes us a lot of resources, but we need to have just a standard national day. That's why we're asking House of Commons at this time. So thank you so much, everyone. Hopefully I will continue connecting with you. Feel free to share us our message. Feel free to share also your comments, and we're very happy to learn, to grow, and to build this movement together. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us.